My father raised his glass in front of 40 relatives and said the house was going to my brother. Afternoon sun hit the backyard in slats through the oak trees, ice clinking in plastic cups, a toddler shrieking on the swing set. He stood there in his new polo shirt and announced that the $2.5 million house, the one I'd refinanced, maintained, and paid for over 5 years, now belonged to Derek. Then he turned to me, smiled, and said, "Thank you for saving our house, Faith." Like I was the caterer. What my father didn't know was that the house couldn't go anywhere without my signature. And what happened next? When my 84-year-old grandfather pushed himself to his feet and opened a leather folder nobody had noticed, made the house look like pocket change. Welcome back to Family Justice Vault. My name is Faith Henderson. I'm 34, and I spent 16 years serving this country in the United States Army. This is the story of how my family thanked me for saving their house by giving it to someone else, and what my grandfather did when he'd had enough. I was stationed at Fort Liberty, North Carolina, Sergeant First Class E7. 2 deployments to Afghanistan, and a job most people found about as exciting as watching paint dry: financial management technician. I managed payroll, reconciled accounts for units, with budgets bigger than small towns. 3 evenings a week, off-duty, I taught a financial literacy class I built myself called Steady Ground for junior enlisted soldiers and their spouses. Nobody asked me to do it. I just couldn't watch people drown in their own bank statements while I knew how to teach them to swim. Every month, I sent $400 home to my parents in Asheville. I told myself it was for the house. It was really for the hope someone would notice. My father, Robert Henderson, built Henderson Hardware from one aisle in a rented warehouse into 2 stores. My mother kept the books and called the store our retirement, our children's future. My brother Derek, 3 years younger, was working the register by 14, sitting in on supplier meetings. When I asked to work summer shifts, my father said, "Derek needs the experience, honey." He never raised his voice when he cut you out. He just rearranged the room so there was no chair left for you. The only person who ever asked what I wanted was my grandfather, Raymond. He lived alone in a cabin at the edge of my parents' property, known to everyone as a retired army man who grew tomatoes. The summer before senior year, I told him I was thinking about enlisting. He didn't panic like my parents would have. He just nodded and said the army made him who he was, and he thought it'd do the same for me. I signed 3 months later. My father said nothing. My mother cried. Derek shrugged and said, "More room for me." The morning I left, only my grandfather stood in the driveway. He handed me his phone number and said, "Call me when you need someone who will listen." I called him every Sunday for 16 years. 16 years compresses fast when you tell it later. Basic training, my first posting in Germany, where I found I had a talent for catching the 13 cents that threw off a 6-figure ledger. 2 deployments, Bagram then Kandahar, managing payroll for 300 soldiers in a combat zone. 0 unaccounted for, not once. I earned every promotion the slow way, got my financial counselor certification studying in a plywood office that shook when helicopters landed. Every visit home, the store looked thinner. Fewer customers, Derek drove a new truck. My parents talked to him about vendor contracts over dinner and asked me one question: "So how's the army?" Then the last time I visited, I found a foreclosure notice in the mail pile. My father called me at 2 a.m., crying for the first time I'd ever heard. He'd taken a second mortgage to save the struggling store, was 3 months behind, his credit score was 520. The bank had started foreclosure. I spent 72 hours finding a way out. A VA loan refinance, lower rate, payment cut 40%. The catch was that a VA loan requires the borrower be on the deed. My mother said, "It's just paperwork, honey." My father said, "We'll sort out the deed later." I saved the house. I restructured the mortgage, set up autopay, absorbed $1,240 a month into my budget. Nobody brought up the deed again. For 5 years, I managed that house from 4 hours away, reviewing tax assessments, coordinating contractors, polishing the brass front door knob that had gone dull. 53 times in 5 years. Nobody noticed. I asked myself why I kept doing it, and the answer was always the same ugly thing. If I stopped, the house would fall apart. And that would prove nobody in this family could hold anything together without me, and that nobody would care enough to try. One March evening, a legal alert hit my inbox. Derek had taken out a merchant cash advance, $180,000 against the store's inventory, at an interest rate equivalent to 38% APR. I called my father. His voice went cold. "Derek knows what he's doing, don't be jealous." My mother got on the line and told me to mind my own business. I called Derek. He texted back, "Mind your own business." I called a real estate attorney, who confirmed my name was on the deed and the mortgage, and that I could file a partition action to force a sale. I saved the number. I never called it back. I didn't want to sue my family. I wanted them to listen. They never did. The invitation to the big reunion came in April. My mother said my father had a special announcement, something wonderful for the family. 15 years of data told me that meant something wonderful for Derek. I almost said no. Then my grandfather called, his voice sharper than usual. "Come to the reunion, Faith. I need you there, trust me." That was all he said, and he was the only person who'd earned the right to say it. On the drive down, I stopped at Henderson Hardware out of habit. 4 cars in the lot on a Friday afternoon, peeling paint, a stale sale banner. At the house, Derek's truck, newer than mine, sat in the driveway. My old room was now storage. My bed was gone, replaced by a futon. On Derek's desk, I saw envelopes from debt collection agencies for merchant cash advances. That night, unable to sleep, I ran a fresh search on the North Carolina Secretary of State website. It wasn't one advance. It was 3. 180,000 from one company, 90,000 from another filed 4 months later, 70,000 from a third filed 6 weeks ago. Total, 340,000 in predatory debt secured against the store, one already in default. The store, by my estimate, was worth roughly 600,000. Subtract the liens, equity was barely over half that. And if creditors came after my father's personal guarantee, the house itself could get pulled into a judgment lien, the house I was still paying down to 220,000. I typed every number into my notes app. Data, not drama. The morning of the reunion broke clear and warm. My mother commanded the kitchen like a forward base. 40 people filled the backyard by early afternoon. My grandfather sat alone at the farthest table in his veteran's cap. I kissed his cheek. He held my hand and said, "Whatever happens today, stand tall, that's an order." After lunch, my father tapped his glass. He talked about the family being built on hard work and staying put, about Derek being there every single day, keeping the business alive. Then he looked at me, and the warmth left his face, replaced by something like courtesy you'd give a stranger. Faith chose a different path. We respect that. Between the announcement and dessert, my grandfather pulled me into the kitchen, then walked me down the gravel path to his cabin. Inside, he told me to open the footlocker under his bed. Cedar rushed up at me. Folded on top was a dress uniform I didn't recognize, a green beret, 3 bronze stars, a silver star with a V device. "Special Forces," he said. 26 years, 3 wars, nobody in this family thought to ask. He lifted a false bottom from the locker and handed me a leather folder. Inside was a trust instrument, the Henderson Legacy Trust, naming me as trustee. 4 rental properties across 4 counties, an index fund portfolio with Vanguard, total estimated value $8.2 million. "I didn't give you this because you're my granddaughter," he said. "I gave you this because for 16 years you served. You saved a house that isn't yours. You warned your father about debts he refused to see. You earned this the way I earned these medals, by showing up when it would have been easier not to." He closed the locker. "Go back to the party. Wait for my signal." Dessert was still being passed when my father stood again, hand on Derek's shoulder. "The house will go to Derek, he's earned it." Applause. Then he turned to me. And Faith, thank you for saving our house for 5 years. We couldn't have done it without you. My mother dabbed her eyes. We're so blessed to have both our children. 40 faces waited for my gratitude. I stood instead. The table tensed, thinking I was leaving. I walked back to it and didn't sit down. My father just gave away my house in front of 40 people, I said, voice flat, the same register I used briefing colonels on budget shortfalls. When you couldn't make the mortgage in 2021, I refinanced this house with my VA loan eligibility. My name is on the deed. My name is on the mortgage. I've made every payment for 5 years. My father blinked. That was temporary, Faith. We agreed. We didn't agree on anything, Dad. You asked me to save the house. I did. Then you never mentioned it again. The murmurs started. I kept going. Since we're being transparent, let's talk about what the house is actually worth. Subtract the $220,000 I still owe. Then subtract the $340,000 in merchant cash advance liens Derek took out against the store's inventory. My father's head snapped to Derek. What liens? Derek's face crumpled. The store was bleeding, Dad. I couldn't let it die. I saw something under his bravado I hadn't expected, a son drowning quietly so his father wouldn't hear the splash. I'm sorry you were in that position, Derek, I said, but your pain doesn't cancel my payments. And it doesn't make this house yours. My uncle pulled up the filings on his phone right there at the table and confirmed every number. My mother went silent, which was worse than tears. My father turned on me. What do you want, Faith? You want to tear this family apart over paperwork? I don't want the house, Dad. I never wanted the house. I wanted you to see what I did to keep it standing. Silence settled over the yard. That's when my grandfather rose. Old soldiers stand slowly, deliberately. He took off his cap. Sit down, everyone. I have something to say. Even my father obeyed. Most of you know me as a man who grows tomatoes. I served 26 years in Army Special Forces, Command Sergeant Major, 3 Bronze Stars, a Silver Star. I served in Vietnam before half of you were born. The laughter in the yard died. When I came home, I let my son believe I was a simple old man because it was easier than explaining what I'd seen. But I also invested quietly for 30 years in index funds and rental properties across 4 counties. Your grandmother knew. My attorney knows. Nobody in this family ever asked. He laid the trust documents on the table. The Henderson Legacy Trust holds $8.2 million. The trustee, the person who manages every dollar, is not my son. He turned to me. It's my granddaughter, Sergeant First Class Faith Henderson. I didn't choose her because she's my granddaughter. I chose her because in 16 years, she never once served herself first. She's the only person at this table who's proven she can be trusted with other people's money. My father was on his feet, face dark red. You had $8 million and you never. I built that store from nothing. I gave up everything for it. And you gave it all to her. Raymond looked at his son with something between grief and exhaustion. I didn't give her a store, Robert. I gave her a responsibility because she's the only one here who's earned one. My mother reached for me. Tell your grandfather this isn't right. It's not my decision to make, Mom. It's his. I turned to my father, quiet enough that he had to stop shouting to hear me. You said thank you for saving our house. You were right, I did save it, and I'm going to keep it saved. I just didn't save it for you. My grandfather let the silence settle, then kept going. This trust is not a punishment. It's a correction. My son confused the store with the family. He confused staying with loyalty and silence with weakness. He turned to Derek, voice dropping. You're not a bad man. You're a man who was set up to fail by a father who needed you to succeed in his image. Get help with the debt. The trust will cover counseling, but Faith decides when funds are released. Derek looked at me, eyes red, and nodded once. The family friend who'd witnessed the trust 2 years earlier stood and confirmed every detail was legal, documented, final. My mother finally spoke, voice paper thin. But the house. We thought the house stays. I'm not selling it, I said. I'm not filing a partition action. The mortgage stays in my name because I'm the one paying it. When it's paid off in 4 years, we'll talk about what's fair as a family at a table, not as a speech in front of 40 people. I could have walked away with everything. I didn't. The house stayed. My parents could live in it, but it stayed on my terms, the terms of the person who'd actually been paying for it. I stood one last time, not to leave, but to be seen. I didn't come here to fight. I came because my grandfather asked me to. I've spent 16 years serving a country that says thank you with a handshake. I spent 5 of those years serving a family that says thank you by handing my brother the house I kept standing. I don't need the house. I don't need the 8.2 million. What I needed was for someone in this family to see me, not the daughter who left, not the sister who was jealous. The woman who showed up every time she was called and never asked for credit. I looked at my father. I hope someday you will too. I sat down, not a drop spilled from my glass. My grandfather added one more thing before the table could recover. He'd quietly enrolled in steady ground himself 8 months earlier, not for the counseling, but to see with his own eyes what his granddaughter had built for free, on her own time. 300 families enrolled, average debt reduction 42%, near zero default rate. You built a hardware store, Robert, he said. She built a lifeline. And you couldn't see the difference. He slid the folder across the table to me. Derek walked around and said, "I'm sorry." I nodded. We didn't hug, not yet. 3 months later, Derek had enrolled in a debt restructuring program the trust paid the counseling for, but he negotiated his own payment plan. He closed the second store location, and by September the original store was barely profitable again, but the bleeding had stopped. My father texted once a week, short messages. My mother called every first Sunday, crying, sometimes talking about nothing but the weather and her tomatoes. I listened the way she needed to be listened to, and then said good night. Steady Ground expanded to 2 more military installations, 500 families now. The house stayed in my name. Derek moved into a small rental near the store. The house became what it should have been all along, a family place for holidays, not a trophy for one person's ego. I drove back to Asheville one weekend in October, walked up the porch steps, and put my hand on the brass door knob. Cool, smooth, slightly tarnished, I didn't polish it. Someone else would have to learn to take care of it now. The hardest thing I ever did wasn't saving my family's house, or managing an $8 million trust, or standing in front of 40 relatives while my father pretended I didn't matter. The hardest thing was learning that serving someone doesn't obligate them to see you, and that being unseen doesn't make your service worth any less. If someone in your life does the work that no one sees, tell them today, before a family reunion does it for you. Share this story, leave a comment below, and subscribe to Family Justice Vault.